Headlines: The Unusual Suspects, showcasing fairness and privilege and women empowerment against patriarchy.
Patriarchy, a fight finally won by women in episode 2 of The Unusual Suspects.
Privilege finally has been checked in the final episode of The Unusual Suspects.
Lasallian, analyzing the unusual suspects in a deeper perspective in Expert Confessions.
Good day, everyone. I am Justin De La Rosa.
And I am Prince Buencamino. Welcome to the program where we give life to stories around the world. This is Big News in a Small World.
For today's episode, we are going to give life to one Australian miniseries titled The Unusual Suspects.
For the news prologue, we will be giving a prompt or thesis statement to describe the miniseries. Then, we will be revealing two themes found in the miniseries to support the claims of the thesis statement.
For our statement of the day that acts as our prompt, we have as follows. Life has evolved into a world shouting for fairness and women empowerment. This thesis statement contains two important themes which will be mentioned throughout the program.
In the miniseries, two themes have been identified that align with the statement of the day. First is patriarchy, the second is privilege. Two problematic and controversial topics that continue to plague the Filipino society today.
Let us first define the theme of patriarchy. What exactly is it anyway? According to Oxford Languages, it is a system of society or government in which men hold the power and women are largely excluded from it. It is built on the misogynistic beliefs that men are more powerful and capable than women, and thus deserve the right to control or rule. Currently, in the Philippines, 17 of the 24 current senators are men, and many still believe that women are merely homemakers and childbearers, subordinates to men. This concept of patriarchy is best shown and challenged in episode 2. Particularly, Nick's offered deal with Evie as well as Roxanne's troubles with Jordan. More on this will be discussed later on in the program.
Now let us define the theme of privilege. Do you consider yourself as a privileged one? Well, privilege is defined in Britannica Dictionary as a benefit or special opportunity that is given to some people and not to others. It is the advantage that wealthy and powerful people have over other people in a society. People who have privileges or those who are more privileged tend to be very aggressive and assertive with their actions. In episode 4, it shows that the rich and the poor are distinct from one another in terms of confidence. Sarah and Roxanne, who have more privileges, were more aggressive with their actions in handling the situations. On the other hand, Evie and Amy were very careful, conservative, and afraid of risks and consequences of their involvement in the heist. Did you see what privilege can do? This and more will be featured in the succeeding news.
The top news for today is all about patriarchy. Is there really forever for patriarchy? Or we can say, and now the end is near? In fact, patriarchy has been a fight finally won by women in episode 2 of The Unusual Suspects. As they say, everything has an ending. Has patriarchy ended? Let us see what women have done. Live via satellite, we have our reporter, Chester Ruiz. Chester?
Yes, Justin. Good day, everyone. I'm Chester Ruiz, your reporter for the first theme, patriarchy. Now, as previously mentioned, patriarchy is heavily built upon the belief that men are superior to women. And throughout the running of this mini-series, we see and hear of the tug-of-war between man and woman. Let's dive deeper.
One of the earliest instances of man underestimating and belittling woman can be seen in episode 2. Here we see that Evie was constantly being talked over by her husband back in the Philippines about how she is keeping lies, calling her selfish and whatnot. Not to mention that he was constantly hushing her down whenever she tries to explain that things are not as they seem like in the social media posts that Sarah posts. Alongside this, we also witness the manipulative actions her husband does, using Melanie and Evie's love for her to get what he wants, with Evie being powerless against him as she is all the way in Australia. Another instance can be seen in the Waters family, Despite Roxanne being highly against Jordan bringing his mom Jeannie into the household, especially seeing as Jeannie acts highly racist towards her, Jordan still overrode her opinion, when in fact, normally a healthy relationship would take the inputs of both of the parties involved. This interaction left the couple's relationship strained. Additionally, here we also see that Jordan gifting Roxanne a $60 million necklace that didn't even belong to him in the first place, which later caused a scene and strained their relationship further. We also hear of Jordan being a scammer and running a Ponzi scheme, which directly affected the perfect image that Roxanne's business had. Lastly, Nick. Not only did he set Sarah up, causing a scandal which directly affected her chances of getting a successful investment, but he also tried to buy out Evie's loyalty towards Sarah, wanting for her to plant malware on Sarah's laptop and further bribing her with money that Evie desperately needed. All just so that Nick could get some scoops, all just for money. Prior to these men's involvement, Roxanne had a booming business. Sarah was well on her way to getting an investment for her website, and Evie and Amy were very capable and strong women who can keep the household together while juggling their own issues back at home.
However, despite all these women being taken advantage of, they all united in the end to run a successful heist, showcasing to us the ingenuity and capability of women, especially when without the shackles of bad male figures, which is in line with our prompt of life has evolved into a world shouting for fairness and women empowerment. So this ends my report for the unusual suspects. Once again, this is Chester Ruiz for Big News in a Small World.
I see. But now, based on the events in the story, do you think that patriarchy has run its course for the characters in the story, seeing as how it seems that the women supporting each other were able to overcome their difficulties and run a successful heist?
Oh no, definitely not. Even though throughout the show we see the empowerment of women, towards the end we can still see hints and situations wherein a guy dismisses a girl. As with the case of the two detectives in the bar in the last episode, here we see Detective Lynn having a theory on how the entire heist actually went down, with every point of hers being right on the money. However, it is also here that we see Detective Moran shooting it down, calling it silly.
Agreed. I believe we also don't know of the details on what happened between Evie, her husband, and her child Melanie, and it is entirely possible that Evie is still tied down to the demands and emotions of her husband, seeing as how in the show, he was always seen having outbursts when he didn't get what he wants, not to mention his manipulative actions that take advantage of Evie's love for Melanie.
Oh yeah, that's very true. We can only hope that Evie spoke her mind and stood up for herself, seeing as how much trouble she encountered while trying to provide for a better life for her family, only for her husband to dismiss, doubt, and manipulate her. Once again, thank you very much, Chester Ruiz.
Another hot topic for today is privilege, something that is rarely ever checked by those who have an abundance of it, yet continue to reap the benefits of it through their actions. In the finale of The Unusual Suspects, how exactly did privilege affect the decision-making process and actions of the characters involved in the story? How exactly does it relate to the reality present in our country? Live via satellite, we have our reporter, Miguel Alaan. Miguel?
Yes, Prince. Good day, everyone. I'm Miguel Alaan, and now I will be reporting the second theme, which is privilege. As discussed earlier, privilege is an advantage typically possessed by people of high social standing, those who are characterized by their wealth and power. Although privilege is usually inherited, there are people who earn them. Throughout the miniseries, we were able to witness the difference between those who have privilege and those who don't, which we will now be delving deeper into.
Before we proceed to the analysis of privilege in the miniseries, let us first identify who out of the protagonists, the four women primarily involved in the heist, had privilege and who did not. The four women I am referring to are Sarah Beasley, Evie De La Rosa, Roxanne Waters, and Amy. Out of the four characters, Sarah Beasley and Roxanne Waters were the ones with privilege, managing their own businesses, living in expensive houses, wearing designer clothes and bags, and the like. On the other hand, Evie De La Rosa and Amy were the characters that didn't have privilege, working as house helpers for Sarah's and Roxanne's households, away from their families back in the Philippines. Now that we have established who had privilege and who didn't, what exactly was the difference between the two? In the show, Sarah and Roxanne could afford to act more impulsively, Sarah being able to go on a date on a whim despite having no money, and Roxanne being able to just throw caution to the wind and sing karaoke despite her own problems. In contrast, Evie and Amy were more cautious of their own actions, carefully considering any consequences that may come from them and having no leeway to just give up. This was best exemplified in the fourth and final episode. Although the heist failed, the characters were able to shift the whole blame to Nick and avoid going to prison. Instead of walking away empty-handed, which Evie and Amy accepted, Sarah and Roxanne voted to go to Ray's house and tried to steal the necklace back from her, despite the threats that Ray directed towards Sarah's children. Unfortunately, their plan failed and Sarah ended up shooting Ray with a gun. However, towards the end, we found out that Ray was still alive and that Evie had planned to fool the rest of the crew by pretending to lose the necklace to Ray, just to prevent Sarah from immediately spending the money, which would have raised suspicion on them, thereby increasing the risk of getting caught. Although they all had something to lose by getting caught, the consequences were far more dire for Evie and Amy. For Evie, she risked losing her own house and not seeing her daughter again. For Amy, she risked being deported and wasting a huge portion of her life by not being able to save any money for her family and retirement. As for the other two characters, although they also stood to lose something, their wealth and connections could have minimized the repercussions of getting caught. Thankfully, Evie had it all planned out.
Overall, having privilege minimized the consequences of the characters' actions and as a result, influenced their behavior as well. Which is why when it came down to it, Evie and Amy were able to adapt and respond appropriately to unforeseen circumstances and outcomes. Unlike the other characters, specifically Sarah, who tends to break down from the inconveniences they encountered. This concludes my report for The Unusual Suspects. Once again, this is Miguel Alaan for Big News in a Small World.
Thank you, Miguel. That was very insightful. I just have one question, if you don't mind me asking. Considering the events that unfolded, do you think that privilege is a bad thing?
That's a very good question, Prince. I wouldn't say that privilege is inherently bad. It is simply a characteristic that some people possess and some don't. Privilege only becomes bad when the way it is addressed in society leads to injustices or inequalities. A good example of this would be in Gigi's case, where she stole a diamond bracelet from a jewelry shop in the Philippines. Normally, one would be arrested for this. However, her parents paid for this and she was able to avoid the consequences. On the other hand, privilege can also be something that is earned or a reward. A good example of this would be Roxanne, where she started out the same as Amy, but through hard work, she was able to establish her own businesses and earn her privileges. No matter the case, it is clear that privilege has an effect on their own behaviors.
Well, I agree. Privilege isn't inherently bad, and it can either be inherited or earned, as shown in Gigi and Roxanne's own circumstances. Although in Gigi's case, it might have been an accident, her punishment was being sent to Australia, which wouldn't even be considered a punishment for other people, but an opportunity. As for Roxanne, it was simply a case of reaping what she sowed.
That's very true. At the end of the day, what matters is the way people approach privilege in the society. Once again, thank you very much, Miguel Alaan.
Now, we are off to our special interview segment titled Expert Confessions. In this segment, we would interview different people in a discourse setting to analyze the news reports we have for each episode.
For today's episode, we have a student from Dela University in Manila who is a literature enthusiast. She is ID 122 and is currently taking up Bachelor of Science in Computer Science. Ladies and gentlemen, Micole Chua. Good day, Micole.
Good day, Justin and Prince. Thank you for having me here today.
So our first question is the same as our question to Chester. Do you think that patriarchy has run its course for the women on the show?
I agree with Chester's answer. Although some of their situations have improved, like Roxanne divorcing Jordan and him going to jail and thus being less able to fight for custody for their children, patriarchy still has its effects on the women shown in the story. Like Prince mentioned, the exact details of what was decided about Evie's situation with Modesta were never disclosed. Given that there is a child involved, it is very possible that Modesta may still be able to control Evie by suing for custody.
Controlling husbands can truly be a nightmare. Our second question was also a question posed to our reporter Miguel. Do you think privilege is a bad thing?
It being bad or good depends on the context and use. For example, as a Lasallian, I have experienced the grueling enrollment system. The Dean's Listers have the privilege of choosing the best professors, while the rest of the students have to fight over good profs or even open slots. This can make it so that the Dean's Listers can get better grades compared to non-Dean's Listers, since they may have more experience or even perhaps a more lenient prof. This is good for Dean's Listers and bad for those who aren't. Overall bad though, since this means there's an increased pressure to get good grades.
This system is familiar indeed. Moving on though, our last question is, did you feel that our themes encompass the mini-series or do you have your own theme in mind?
I feel that cooperation is also a common theme. The cooperation of Evie and Sarah to plan Nick's art show, of the protagonists as they plan and execute the heist, also the protagonists when the heist went off the script and they started rushing to improvise, and even the cooperation of Ray because they knew that Sarah would recklessly spend the cash and get all of them caught. All of these were vital to the story and the character development of our protagonists.
That's an interesting insight. Indeed, cooperation between the women was integral in their success. But sadly, we don't have time anymore for our interview. Once again, thank you so much, Micole Chua, for being our guest for today.
Thank you very much.
Wow! What a mini-series we have here. The Unusual Suspects. It's a short yet meaningful and complex story. The characters are real people with different personalities in the real world.
Indeed, who knew that so much depth and lessons can be fit inside just 4 approximately 50-minute episodes? Certain TV shows could never.
Yes, the world is truly changing. The silent ones and submissive women have learned to express their thoughts and feelings more freely. Women have shouted for empowerment and fairness. People have gained courage and confidence to fight for what is fair and just. Life is evolving and will continue to evolve as people learn to handle challenges with their strengths.
Truly, the creation and distribution of groundbreaking TV shows like The Unusual Suspects show that more and more people are rallying together to send a message to the world that women are indeed just as capable or even more so than men, and that they deserve the same opportunities and should demand the same respect in the society of ours.
This stays true to our statement of the day, that life has evolved into a world shouting for fairness and women empowerment. Now, we have reached the end of today's episode. Once again, this is Justin De La Rosa, saying that in good times or bad times, we are always here to give big news in a small world. It's a wonderful world after all.
And this is Prince Buencamino, saying that even if your special someone isn't updating you, we certainly will. Thank you for watching the program where we give life to stories around the world. This is
Big news in a small world. Thank you very much and have a great day.